Are we set now? Yeah, thanks. Wow. Hey, thank you for being here this evening. And how many have heard Nicholas play before? How come you didn't tell all your friends? So those of you that haven't heard him are going to be in for a tremendous treat. And the next time he comes, the place in here will be packed, I'm sure. Nicholas is one of those musicians that should be on your bucket list of people to listen to play because of the beautiful melodies, because of the rhythmic intricacy, and because of the way his heart is put together and it comes out in his playing. Those of you that know a little bit about his background, his parents were missionaries in Paraguay, where they lived in 5-year stints and then come back for 1 year, is that correct? To Minneapolis area. And so he had this beautiful life in Paraguay, then he'd come back and get confused for a year, and then then go back to Paraguay. But he is bilingual, he might be trilingual, I'm not sure, and speaks both languages, and we're excited that he's here this week for World Communion Sunday, so he's going to play this Sunday morning as well. So anyway, enough about me talking about him. Let's listen to this guy play. Nicholas, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good evening. That was an original composition called Camino de la Libertad, which means on the road to freedom. And I wrote this a few years back, and lately I'm playing it as my first song in the concerts. I guess it's something that I just feel I need to play, you know, on the road to freedom. And this instrument that I play is a traditional folk harp from the country of Paraguay. As he mentioned, I was a child growing up in Paraguay, and there were a couple of fun things to do after schools. Now, you got to imagine, back in the 1970s, Paraguay was very similar to United States, probably in the 1920s and 30s. I mean, we're talking about, there was a guy who had horses just around the corner where I lived, and I used to remember these ladies that came selling produce from the marketplace on their donkeys. And, you know, that type of course, there were trucks and there were buses and there were cars, but overall, you know, there was this thing. The neighbor in front, for example, had water that she took out from a well, you know, and all my neighbors didn't have, they all had latrines. None of them had a real indoor bathroom like we did. So, you know what I'm talking about is that the world was very different back in those days. And so TV, for example, did not exist. I mean, it existed, but it started at a certain time and died at a certain time, and my mom and dad didn't buy one, you know. So if I wanted to watch TV, I had to go to the neighbors, and that wasn't too cool. So we would play soccer after school every day, and then there were a couple folk instruments that were really fun, the guitar and the harp. And my brother took on the guitar, and I took on the harp, and we eventually became a duet. And I just loved it from a kid. I saw festivals, harp players all over the place. You know, in the church, there was a guy who played the harp. So I kind of wanted to be one of those guys, you know. And this is one of the songs that I learned to play back in Paraguay, and it's a waltz. It's called Luna Llena, the Full Moon. So how did a country like Paraguay ever end up with an instrument so popular as the harp? Imagine that we beat the Guinness record in Paraguay with 420 people playing together in one big kind of gymnasium. And that was done a few years back. If you look it up in YouTube, you'll find. And it's just a popular instrument there. And it started out back in the 1600s. The harp was a very popular instrument in Europe. That Renaissance harp was brought to the Americas, and many different parts of Spanish-speaking Americas inherited that harp. That harp that was popular in Europe disappeared from European tradition. They now have it as historical harps, but it did not continue. When they started doing the classical pedal harp, it was almost like starting a new tradition. And the Irish, who are known for being harpers, had a 100-year interruption where they didn't play harp in Ireland. So they had to restart their tradition all over again. So in some ways, we are the direct descendants of those Renaissance folks with this instrument. The instrument was introduced through the Jesuit missionaries in Paraguay. They established important missions in what is today known as southern Paraguay, northern Argentina. These missionaries were known for bringing music, bringing amazing architects, artists of all kinds. So they did amazing artwork in these missions, including beautiful sculptures with a nice little touch of the native sensitivity. And the same thing happened with this instrument. The Guarani people had never heard string instruments prior to the arrival of these missionaries, and they fell in love with the European music. And they say that the music they sang in their churches was equally beautiful in quality as what was being sung in Europe at the same time. And so for many years it was nicknamed the Guarani harp because they really took on the passion, the zest to keep this tradition going. They used to have gut strings, and eventually they changed them to nylon strings. But the main evolution of this instrument was a very famous Paraguayan composer who put the strings through the middle of this neck instead of having the strings on the side. If you look at Lynn's harp, who plays here at church, she has the strings on the side of the neck. And that was the Paraguayan kind of genius idea, to create a lot more tension on a very light sound box like is the Paraguayan harp. And that's what gave it its kind of unique tone. And just in memory of those missionaries, I'll play something from, do you remember there was a movie called The Mission years ago, back in the late 80s? And there was music from Ennio Morricone, who I think he passed away last year. So these are little bits and pieces from the soundtrack of that film. So the traditional music that I grew up playing as a kid is called Paraguayan polka. And do we have any Polish folks here, that dance the polka? But anyway, similar. It's not kind of like the Polish polka, but the footstep is kind of similar. So 1, 2, 3, and a 1, 2, 3, and a 1, 2, 3, and a 1, 2, 3. The guys kind of like, open their arms. Go, chasing the ladies. She's too cute and she doesn't want to dance with him, Eventually, there is finally the moment where she lets go and she says yes, and they dance together. That's very typical. Women dance with bottles on their heads or water jugs balanced on their heads. They dance barefoot, by the way, too, like the native people used to walk barefoot. So different from the Mexican dances, that is a lot of the foot stamping. This is dance barefoot. But the balancing things on the head was what the native people did. They always carried, even when I was a kid, I'd go to the marketplace and I see this guy with 20 brooms balanced on his head, walking down the marketplace, and yelling, escoba, 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 dos por mil, escoba, And that's just, so everywhere I went, I would see people, like ladies balancing baskets with vegetables or fruit on their heads. It was so typical. So that's kind of the gist of this song. It's dancing, music, and what was at one time very popular music. Now there's other kinds of music that are very popular, but in my days, this would have been what you would go out to dance for. Yeah, that's the style of music that I grew up with. So you can imagine it was challenging at the beginning because they play two different rhythms at the same time. The bass pattern in Paraguayan music is always 3/4, and then the melody is always in 6/8. So, once you get it, you got it for the rest of your life. And then learning new songs was pretty easy because it was always the same bass pattern. You didn't have to relearn something new, But the melody is what you did. And by the way, I learned to play by ear, kind of monkey see, monkey do technique, You just see, you repeat, you learn, you memorize, and then you retain the kind of notion of music in terms of different sections, in terms of patterns. That's the way you learn a lot of things, by patterns. And then visually as well, you know, the strings are colored so that you can have a grasp of where to put your hands. When you're going to skip spacing, you know everything by the relationship between the red or the blue, you know, where to go. So that's kind of how I learned. I eventually studied piano as well when I was in 15, but honestly, I pretended I read and I did like this, and you know, but I was so used to learning by ear that I just never caught on to the reading the music part as much. I figured it out, but I kept my folk tradition was the way I best could be as a musician, I guess. So anyways, one of the great motivations to learning to play was love, right? Because half of the songs that you learn are love songs, right? No? I mean, and when you're a teenager and, you know, you take a serenade to the girls, that's the thing. That is the most popular kind of event. And I loved that, you know, because I was very shy, but I knew I had some buddies that weren't shy, and they were ready to take on the serenade and declare their love to a girl. But they would always need me as a backup, as a harp player. So then I would have a participation as well. And I loved that part, you know. And, you know, you had to be ready. You never know what would happen. At 5 in the morning, it's still dark. Sometimes, you know, we'd be attacked by the dogs in the neighborhood. Sometimes the father would reject us, you know. We'd be kicked out. Sometimes the mom loved it, and she would bring us in for breakfast, you know. Yeah. And then sometimes the girl didn't fall in love with the guy who brought the serenade. She fell in love with the guy that was playing the harp, you know. So, anyways, here's a little love song for you. Recuerdos de Ipacaraí. Well, let me take you a little further south now. I'm going to tour you a little bit of the South American continent, and I'm going to take you to Argentina, Uruguay. From Paraguay, we're in the middle with Bolivia. We're the two landlocked countries in South America. If you head down south, everything kind of changes. You start to have those really, really big plains. The plains kind of like the Midwest of the United States. A similar kind of agricultural area exists also very big in Argentina and Uruguay, and also known for cattle raising areas, no? And I had an uncle who used to dress like a gaucho. You know the gaucho is a South American cowboy. He used to have these big baggy pants, no? And he always had his little mate tea. It's a little gourd with a kind of a straw, and he had a thermos, and he'd always carry the thermos like under his arm, you know? It was almost like attached to his arm, the thermos, you know? Everywhere you go, you didn't have to. And he'd be serving always this and drinking this tea. And this song that I want to play for you, I composed it when I was living in Uruguay. It's in the rhythm called malambo, which is a rhythm that's played by the gauchos. And if you hear it, you will feel that kind of horse, like you're riding on a horse type of feel. I call the song Pa que salga el sol. It's kind of a slangish way of saying, I hope the sun comes out. Pa que is not pronouncing para que, you know, it's not speaking fluently, but it's the way the gauchos kind of speak Spanish. But I guess it was raining for about 3 weeks when I was living in Uruguay, and I was just desperate to see the sun. So that's why I gave it that name. And it's what I hope even for today. More sun for all of us in this world, no? I mean, the presence of God, the presence of the divine in our lives, no? That's no way. What I say. Here we go. Hope you can ride a little along with me here. Esa. Ahí vamos. Yes, I always love to see my relatives in South America from my mother's side, because my mother was born in Uruguay. She was not from Paraguay. She met my dad in Chicago. And they fell in love pretty quick and decided to join their partnership very quickly. You know, they kind of like they found each other. I think they were like soulmates, you know, like the perfect match, because they were completely different, but at the same time, completely compatible and helped each other out so well during over 40 years. My mom passed away, but my dad is well, and he had a little thing last year, first time in the hospital in 87 years. That's pretty good, no? Only once in your life in the hospital, you know, that's really good. So anyways, he's from Minnesota, and he sure has that tenacious, strong American vitality, that's for sure. And but when I would go visit my family in Uruguay, in Argentina, they speak Spanish quite different from us in Paraguay. We're a little bit more humble and low-key in Paraguay, but in Argentina, they speak Spanish kind of like the Italians in New York, you know. Che, ¿qué pasa, primo? Te llamé ayer y no me llamaste por teléfono. You know, they're right in your face, and they speak really loud, and they speak, you know, like they know everything. And they're very expressive, and, you know, we are like, you know, we just take it more easy than they do, you know. They're really intense, you know. And so I'd be intimidated a little bit by my uncle when he spoke, because, you know, I thought he was a little kind of scary for me coming from Paraguay. But then I started to realize as we grew up that everybody in Latin America just likes to make a little joke about the Argentinians because they're just a little bit too proud. And one of the jokes is, do you know the business deal of your life? You know, is to buy an Argentinian for what he's worth and then sell him for what he says he's worth. Anyways, this is a beautiful melody from Ariel Ramirez. He composed the famous Misa Criolla. I don't know if your choir has ever done it here in church, that Argentinian Mass. Beautiful, beautiful choir. And this is a song that he composed about a very famous poet called Alfonsina Storni, and it's called Alfonsina and the Sea. Well, let's take you now to Brazil. wife is from Brazil, Paraguay, actually, both countries. And boy, you know, living in New York, the other day we walked into a grocery store that was Brazilian. You know that in the East Coast, there's sections where there's a lot of people from, you name it, whatever part of the world. So there's like an area where there's full of Brazilians. We went to a place and it was like, it felt like we were in Brazil all of a sudden. But we went into a grocery store and she left and she was crying. I said, why are you crying? He says, oh, I miss so much the kindness. Because the lady in the grocery store took time to talk to her, to just spend time and be sweet, you know, because in New York, there's kind of a tendency to everybody being a little bit in a hurry, you know. Hey, what do you want? Yeah, okay, get out, bye. You know, that kind of thing. And that always shocked her coming from Brazil. There's a lot of warmth in Brazil. And I think you'll feel it in the music as well. Joy and a lot of joy. The Argentinians are a little more grumpy, but the Brazilians are very kind of more happy, kind of their general style, no? I composed also something that was sort of in the style of Brazilian music. I called this song The Cross of the South. Our Big Dipper in the Southern Hemisphere is the Cross of the South, right? It's the kind of the guiding stars that indicate where the Southern Hemisphere, where the South is. And in my grandmother's home in Uruguay, my grandparents were Swiss, actually, and they immigrated to Uruguay in the 1920s. And my grandfather was a pastor. Boy, I have pastors all over around me, you know, in my ancestry, you know. From my dad's side, my aunt was a pastor. And then my parents were missionaries. I was lining up to become a pastor also, but then I heard God saying, you know, we have enough pastors in your family, but there's no harp players. So let's do that. So anyways, that location, that grandma's home, you know, they were Swiss. They built it in a countryside, kind of like rural Minnesota in a way. You know, it was peach orchards and apple trees in the area, colder climate than in Paraguay, but a beautiful view of the sunset. And then when the sun was down, then the stars would shine up, and it was just majestic because the big river, Rio La Plata, is like 60 kilometers wide. So that's a whole area that nothing is built, you know, so you really get a nice dark spot in that location. You're far away from any big city, and it's amazing to see the stars. Anyways, this is Cross to the South. Yes? Yes. Yes. That's the one, yes. Well, I thought I'd take you to the Andes. I don't remember what song I played last time I was here. I normally play one or a couple different songs from the mountains of South America. Do you remember if I played the Simon and Garfunkel one last time? El Condor Pasa, or did I do a different one? Does anybody remember from what I did last concert when I was here? Oh, it was a Christmas concert. Oh, okay. So then maybe nobody recalls exactly what song. But you remember there was a very famous song by Simon and Garfunkel, right? Called El Condor Pasa, the flight of the condor. You ever heard that song? Da, 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 da. It's a classic. I mean, it was so popular that they even included it in one of those golden albums that were sent in the 1970s out into outer space as a sample of world music. This song is a song that's normally played with a flute. And Simon and Garfunkel obviously made it very popular here in the United States, but it was very popular already in many parts of the world thanks to the musicians that play the flutes and all that. And a friend of mine who is a musicologist was telling me a little bit about what's behind the song. And he says that for the Incas, music was very sacred. And that after the Incas were, obviously, their kingdom was interrupted with the arrival of the Spaniards, there was one kind of myth, legend that kind of stayed in the minds of a lot of the native people in the mountains. And that was that their last leader, Atahualpa, was never captured. So the story says that as the Spaniards came and conquered Cusco, the capital of the Incas, this leader fled into the mountains of the Andes, and he hid in a cave. But the Spaniards wanted to humiliate him and show that in front of all the native people, and so they tried to follow him and find him, and they were surrounding this cave, and then all of a sudden, this, instead of it being a person, it was a condor that flew out of the cave and went straight towards the sun, was never seen again, so that emperor was never captured. And that's the story behind this famous song. Here we go. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We are getting close here to wrapping this concert up, and I wonder if anybody has any questions for me. Any questions? Any special requests? No, I haven't been on the road quite a bit. It's just now that I've started a little bit, just for a little while, yes. Well, you know that this is my, one of my homes, Minnesota. Yeah, I was born here and I spent 25 years here. In fact, I started my career here as a harp player in Minnesota. So I have this complete gratitude. I learned to play in Paraguay, but I became a musician, so to speak, a working musician in the state of Minnesota. You guys want to sing a little bit? Yeah? Would you like singing a little bit? I got a little part for you because this is a Minnesota story. My experience in Minnesota. When I was a college student, I had a job waiting tables at a Chinese restaurant by the University of Minnesota. But one day I was invited by some guys to play at a Mexican restaurant called Chi-Chi's in Minnetonka. It was a Cinco de Mayo event, a Cinco de Mayo special. Now, I didn't know these guys, and I never played with them before. But we only had time to practice 4 songs for a 3-hour gig. Now, I don't know if you remember Chi-Chi's, but back in those days, Chi-Chi's had 3 big rooms. So we went to the first room and we played the 4 songs. Then we went to the second room and played the 4 songs. And then we went to the third room and played the same 4 songs. So by the time we got to that first room, guess what? It was a whole new group of people. We could keep going with the 4 songs all night long. So this is one of the 4 songs. I hope you can sing it with me. Here's a little part for the ladies. Guajira, míralo. That's for the ladies. Guajira, míralo. A little bit louder, please, so I can get you. Guajira, míralo. One more time. Beautiful. Now the guys, yours is a little bit lower. Guajira, míralo. Guajira, míralo. That's the guys. Let's hear you guys. Guajira, míralo. Beautiful. One more time. Okay, now we're going to harmonize with the ladies. Ladies, Guajira, míralo. Guys, keep going. Guajira, míralo. Guajira, mira, yo soy un hombre sincero. Guajira, mira, ¿de dónde crece la palma? Yo soy un hombre sincero. ¿De dónde crece la palma? Antes de morir me quiero echar mis versos del alma. Guantanamera, sing it if you know it. Guajira, Guantanamera. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. los pobres de la tierra. Guajira, mira, quiero yo mi suerte echar con los pobres de la tierra. Quiero yo mi suerte echar. El arroyo de la selva me complace más que el mar. Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira, Guantanamera. Thank you very much. Yes, Guantanamera is from a famous Cuban poet, one of the founding fathers of Cuba. And in the first verse, he says, I am a sincere man where the palm tree grows. Before I die, I want to sing my verses to the world. Guantanamera, I don't know exactly if it's just sounds that sound cool and feel good, but I don't know if some people say it's the woman from Guantanamo, but I'm not too sure about that. And then the second verse says, with the poor of the world, I want to give my luck. The stream of the water, the stream of the jungle pleases me more than the ocean. That's what it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I want to thank Don. Thank you so much for having me here. And I know the circumstances are currently difficult for events, and I'm so happy that you guys made it out here today. I really, really appreciate it. And you want to say something, Don? Go ahead, yes.
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Was that incredible or what? I mean... As many of you know, I'm a percussionist, and so I love the rhythms that he plays with. It's just incredible, and the passion that he plays with. So as you go out, if you want to help us support Nicholas, there are some offering plates that have a little note on them, and feel free to drop some change in there or some quiet money, whichever you have in your pocket. And thank you for coming out. I hope you tell people that we're doing this concert series here. And on November 5th, which is the next First Friday, Marianne, will you raise your hand? You're here, aren't you? Yeah. Yeah, there she is. Marianne will be here with a trio of very talented women playing original music and already composed music, I guess. But it's going to be an incredible evening, just as incredible as a different style altogether, but we have a lot of wonderful musicians out there that need our love and support. So thanks for coming out. Thank you, Nicholas. You going to play one more for us?
Thank you, and I'll play, yes, one little last tune to say goodbye from my last album called Reflections. And I want to thank the sound man. Thank you so much. It sounds amazing here in the church. Yes. Yes, I have CDs out I didn't tell my story of the origin of the harp that I tell kids. Maybe next time I'll do that. But I have a little storybook of how the harp came to be for kids, and I have a book about Latin American harp music as well. This song is called Entre Ramas, which means in between the branches. It was inspired when I lived in France. I went to the backyard of this guy who was a friend of my mother, and he was standing up on his cherry tree, picking cherries right in the middle of June. And he was 80 years old, but he looked like a little kid in a tree, smiling with a little basket, picking cherries. And I just love that image of a little old man, but looks like a little kid, you know. And this is called In Between the Branches. Thank you. Thank you, folks. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I will join you in the back if anybody.